Good evening. I'm Earl Butch Graves, Jr., CEO of Black Enterprise. Welcome to the latest installment of the Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall Series, Closing the Wealth Gap. Our topic for this town hall, Wellness and Health Disparities, how Black people can live better and longer. Today's town hall is sponsored by Gilead Sciences. As the #1 Black digital media brand reaching more than 12 million unique visitors per month, we are dissecting these issues through a business lens with a clear, intentional objective, developing solutions to drive lasting Black economic and financial empowerment. To mark the ongoing racial reckoning birthed from the murder of George Floyd, we at Black Enterprise are staying true to our 50-plus year mission, facilitating candid, no-holds-barred conversations with the best subject matter experts from business, politics, civil rights, social thought leadership, and beyond. Today, we are focused on the health and wellness of Black people and our communities. We've all heard the adage that health is wealth, but we often overlook the clear correlation between health disparities facing Black Americans and our nation's racial wealth gap. At $171,000, the net worth of a typical white family is roughly 10 times greater than that of a Black family at $17,150. Concurrently, while the gap in life expectancy between Black and white Americans has closed over the decades, average life expectancy for white people at 78.5 years is still far greater than that for Black people at 74.9 years. And this was as of 2018, prior to COVID-19, which reports project has reduced the average life expectancy of all Americans by an additional 2 years. These stats underscore the fact that Black people disproportionately experience chronic illness and or premature death at rates greater than white people, and usually during what should be our peak earning years, creating a persistent drag on Black wealth creation. At the same time, the Black-white wealth gap and other economic disparities are clear evidence of the impact of generations of inequality and discrimination, as well as the continuing cycle of diminished access to opportunities and resources. And as the COVID-19 pandemic revealed, this also applies to America's healthcare system. As such, it remains my contention that if we fix the foundational racial divide, wealth, then Blacks will have the means to address those of education, digital, investment, and so many others, including health. To that end, this evening's discussion will focus on not just defining the problem, but more importantly, exploring exactly what we should do about it. What responsibility should corporate America bear to demonstrate a true commitment to dismantling systems of inequality in health and wellness and investing in programs to promote the health and longevity of Black people? What can we do to hold government accountable for creating greater access to quality, affordable health care as a fundamental right of equity and inclusion in America? And finally, what must we do in our own households and communities to increase the richness and longevity of Black lives? We are once again extremely excited to have a 5-star panel to engage in this urgent conversation. This evening's town hall speakers include Fit Beyond 40 founder and NASM certified personal trainer, Kirk Charles, Gilead Sciences Director of Corporate Citizenship and Public Affairs, Dr. Chanel McGoy, women's health dietitian and the Flourish Heights podcast host, Valerie Ajiman, and public health expert and J Dow Fitness founder and CEO, Dr. Jacqueline Dow. Our discussion is led by our dynamic moderator, author, and television personality, Dr. Ian Smith. We also invite you to join this important conversation by sharing your questions and comments via the chat feature. We are proud to partner with Gilead Sciences, our sponsor for this town hall on wellness and health disparities. So without further delay, let's get this important discussion started. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ian Smith, physician, TV personality, and author of the new book, Plant Power. I'm excited you're joining us today for an important conversation in the Black Enterprise Health and Wellness Town Hall. Today, we're going to talk about health disparities as it relates to the African-American community and what you can do right away to improve not just the quality, but the length of your life. Of course, we have great people joining the panel. We have Kirk Charles, who's founder of Fit Beyond 40. We have Jacqueline Dow, who's a public health expert and founder and CEO of J Dow Fitness. Chanel McGoy, Director, Corporate Citizenship, Public Affairs at Gilead Sciences Incorporated. And Valerie Ajiman, who's a women's health dietitian at Flourish Heights. Of course, if you're on social, you can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Ian Smith, spell the doctor out, Ian Smith. And of course, join my Facebook group, Plant Power. And the most important hashtag, please follow it, BE Town Hall. Okay, let's dive right in. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm excited to get into this very important conversation that's long overdue. So let me just get right into it. So much has happened over the course of the pandemic with COVID-19 and the disparities that we've seen. Let me start off by asking what you all think we have learned even more about the disparities and the impact on African Americans and what we need to do going forward. Chanel, let me start with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to be a part of this panel. But what I really think that COVID has exposed to us around health disparities is that the social determinants of health that impact health. It's not only about healthcare. It's not only about healthcare seeking behaviors or the professionals, but also the social issues that impact our health, such as employment, as well as our neighborhoods and communities, as well as education. You think about individuals who had to work during the pandemic. They didn't have the luxury of working remotely, for example, and the exposure and the risks that was involved in just simply getting up and going to work.
So, in the beginning of the pandemic, we were looking at all the numbers. African Americans were dying at a much higher rate. Then when vaccinations came aboard, African Americans were not getting vaccinated as frequently. The vaccines weren't available in our particular geo-concentrated areas. Kirk, let me ask you, I mean, when you were hearing about how all this was going down and not in a great way, what were your thoughts about what we need to tell our brothers and sisters going forward about how we need to be prepared for something like this in the future?
Well, being a fitness trainer, number one, we have to get in better shape, and also we have to eat a lot better. There was a report in the British Medical Journal, and I believe in the Harvard Gazette, that talked about how plant-based eating or pescatarian eating affects COVID. And the symptoms were far less regarding mild to severe symptoms, just being on a plant-based diet. And we need to lose some more weight. Obviously, we know in our communities, we're weighing more than ever. We just have a lot of health problems which are due to that. So more movement and eating better, and I think that will help us a lot and will go a long way.
But Jacqueline, I mean, we know the numbers. We know that we have higher rates of obesity. We have higher rates of conditions related to obesity, heart disease, stroke, diabetes. This is nothing new for us. And to be very honest with you, it's nothing new for a lot of our community. How do we get the community to act? How do we get them to finally say, I need to do better. I need to eat more plant-based foods. I need to stop eating so much red meat, so many fried foods. What do we do now?
I think it really takes us being on one accord in terms of communication from a variety of standpoints, right? It's not just your doctor, but it's also your doctor, your girlfriend, your therapist, right? What you're watching on TV. We all have to be on one accord when it comes to communicating the importance of health, specifically within the Black community. I know that the OWN Network has done a really great job of using entertainers and comedians to talk to women about things like the importance of mammograms and pap smears. So I think we just need to have health be a normal part of our conversation, and we need to hit it from a number of different standpoints. It can't just come from your trainer and your doctor. It literally has to be infiltrated in every aspect of the community.
And there, Valerie, there's the aspect also of the vulnerability we tend to have, given how historically we have been marginalized and disenfranchised, but we have this conspiratorial kind of history of thinking that, you know, it's not straight, that there must be something else at play here, this lack of belief and trust. This is something that I believe that during the pandemic really affected us. You know, given Tuskegee and the history, and we have context and reason for having skepticism. But then we hit the pandemic where we have such a deadly virus, and that skepticism didn't serve us very well. How do we get people to get on board and be more trusting, but still be cautious?
That's a really great question. And I think, you know, in terms of solution, it's a lot of things that we have to take a look at. I mean, I know, like, you know, the pandemic that we've been in, it's affecting, even when we're looking at, you know, the food and nutrition security through the social system shocks and food system disruptions, the gaps in, you know, health and nutrition services. The list pretty much goes on. And we're also looking at, you know, food systems in low income communities. There's just so many things that go into, you know, nutrition and health, affecting, you know, a lot of these vulnerable communities, like you said. You know, we saw that the pandemic had kind of amplified, you know, a lot of these types of issues we're seeing as it relates to nutrition, impacting, you know, your women of reproductive age, especially. That's the community I often or I typically deal with, you know, young children, adolescents. So we know that poor nutrition can have an impact on overall health. We know that it can, you know, weaken your immune system, increasing your susceptibility to some of these diseases. But we need to also take into consideration, you know, all these different disparities that we've seen in the healthcare system. It's already putting us at a bad place, and you know, we're already pretty much at a disadvantage. And I can see how, you know, some of the data that we've seen is the way that it is.
And by the way, guys, feel free to jump in. I don't want this to be, you know, me just asking questions. And I want this to be more of a roundtable conversation for everyone to opine as they see fit. Chanel, we're in a situation where, African Americans are living in food deserts. African Americans are not having the access to healthcare like they should, like others. There's a mistrust of the healthcare system. If you have a patient in front of you who is doubtful, who is skeptical, who does not have this access, but of course is at risk for so many of these chronic illnesses, how do you speak to that patient in a culturally sensitive way so they understand that you know where they are and they believe and want to follow your suggestions as a medical professional?
Absolutely. I think that it's important to listen more than you speak, right? So that you can hear what individuals are saying, patients, community members, what they're saying, and listen for the challenges and barriers that they may experience. As I talked about earlier, maybe it's transportation to work. So that may also mean that they have a difficult time getting to the grocery store, or that there are no grocery stores in their neighborhood. And so listening to how they can access healthy foods. Food deserts are not only a problem in urban areas, but also rural communities where people have to travel long distances. But I think the thing is that many people are coming up with creative and innovative ways of growing gardens. There are small corner stores that are popping up like they had been many, many years ago, mom and pop stores that sell fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as gardens in urban and rural areas where people are sharing their produce, growing greens and cabbage and other goodies, other good vegetables that they can then share. And so I think, are often going back to some of the simple ways that we used to do things to create better and healthy lifestyles for people. But to answer your question, I think it's important to listen for what people aren't not saying, to hear those signs, and to be able to provide some recommendations to help them within their own environments and within their own communities that are accessible to them.
And Dr. Ian, can I add on to that a little bit? Also, we have to show people a way to go. They respond more to what they see. And I say that, when I say that, I mean showing people how to cook differently. Maybe some people want to fry everything that they make, or they only want to eat certain types of meats, or which can be cancer-causing meats like bacon, something like that. So one of the things that I do is I have a cooking class where I don't use any oil and no additives, all just natural food. Once you see that and you know how to make it, then you're more aware of what's there and what you can work with and what you shouldn't work with. And you can make something that's very tasty and much more nutritious than what you can buy at a fast food establishment or something like that. So if we show people, just hold them by the hand a little bit more, I think that'll go a long way also.
Well, to your point, for example, on my Instagram page, I try to show exercises. I try to show cooking demonstrations. I try to really make it so that people understand the ease of use, right? I mean, I think that's important. People don't want to be overwhelmed by what they think may be something complicated. And Jacqueline, when I think about it, like I've been saying, I'm more plant-based myself with my new book, Plant Power. And so I'm advocating for us to eat more plant-based foods. I'm not fully vegan or vegetarian, but I am suggesting that we reduce the amount of meat we consume and increase the amount of plant-based foods, because studies do show lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol levels, prevent heart disease. But that being said, Jacqueline, there has to be a way to communicate and to convince people to be more open-minded, right? I mean, we tend to be very comfortable with the familiar. And when you see things like quinoa and different types of recipes that are not familiar with you, the reflex automatically is, how do we get people to say, listen, let's try a little bit, open up your mind, open up your palate, and try these new things?
Actually, social media is a great platform to do that. So you mentioned having a plant-based diet. So that's actually something that I did. I said, well, you know what? It's the pandemic. I've gained some weight. I need to really get back on track. And so how do I do that? But be honest and transparent, with my followers, with my network, with my community, to say, hey, I've fallen off the bandwagon. I need to get it together. This is something that, I'm not an expert in, so to speak. I'm not a nutritionist, but I'm just like you, I'm trying to get back on track in terms of my health and wellness. So I was very candid and transparent. It was supposed to be for 30 days. It actually ended up being for 90 days because I actually absolutely loved it. But one thing that I stressed was not telling yourself no. You know, I love pizza. I love tacos. You know, I love all of the comfort foods that we all kind of gravitate to. So it wasn't, oh no, you can't have that. But it's like, okay, if I'm on a plant-based diet, how do I make plant-based tacos? How do I make plant-based pizza? You know, and how do I make them with items that are affordable, that are tangible, you know, within my community? And then I shared that, you know, every day, here's what I'm eating, here's how I'm feeling. And at the end of every month, I kind of gave an update on, you know, the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses. And at the end of the 90 days, it was really interesting to see how many people had already gone out and like tried recipes or tried specific things. And so it really became just this community of, hey, I tried this. Why don't you, you know, why don't you think about making it this way? Or I found this cookbook, right? So I think it's just us being open and honest about trying something new and sharing that with other people. And you will be very kind of surprised to see how people just gravitate towards just trying something different. But I think it's not telling people no, you know, you can't have this or you can't do this, but it's like, okay, how do we work within what naturally works for you, what naturally works for your family?
And
I
Jacqueline, I
see.
hear you. I hear you saying that, and it's almost the same thing with the physical activity piece, right? The accountability and you know, thinking about, you know, what is accessible to me. A fancy bike, you know, may not be my jam, but you know, taking a walk outside. And I know we have fitness experts here too. Mhm.
Yeah, definitely taking a walk outside. I encourage people to get exercise every day, obviously. But something that Jacqueline said, I'd just like to add on, not putting a label on food as far as it being good or bad. Because once you do that, you make the person feel like, well, I'm bad if I eat the food. If I eat a hot dog every day, there's something wrong with me. I don't want to get into that conversation. What does the food actually do for you? What are the results that it produces instead of whether it's good or bad? And you know, once a person understands that, then they can make a more informed choice. They're not as emotional about it. They're not offended. Because what we don't want to do when we're trying to get people to transition to plant-based diet, and by the way, I've been vegan, I think I'm the oldest member on the panel here. I've been vegan for more than 30 years, since '89. So I've gone through the whole spectrum. You first become a junk food vegan, you eat every type of fake meat you can possibly eat. I stopped doing that years ago. Now I'm more of a whole food plant-based person. So we have to take it easy with people because they may not have the knowledge. And if you offend people, they'll immediately become defensive and they won't listen to a word you say. So again, we got to hold them by the hand and give them a positive message.
Valerie, I see you shaking your head a lot.
Oh yeah, I'm like loving all this already, and such great points were already made. But I want to just add, like when you search social media, whether that's Instagram, when you look at the, you know, the media, mainstream wellness, you see, you know, images of, you know, mostly salads. You see people, you see one color, which is, you know, you see mostly Caucasian, thin, you know, woman. And so when you're Googling things like healthy eating, what do you see? Smoothies and grain bowls. And I was laughing when you mentioned the quinoa earlier, but we need to think more broadly about like, you know, what to eat to be healthy. And when we're seeing a certain image, it kind of confuses people because it's like, oh, you're saying like my cultural foods aren't healthy. You know, a lot of the times we're kind of demonizing some of these foods, but in our culture, okra, give me some names, guys. Beans,
Yeah.
Potatoes.
all these things are, you know, nutrient dense, and these traditional foods are very, very healthy. And so food and culture, they're very well connected. And so there's just multiple ways to eat healthfully, and there's just so many faces to health, you know, so many bodies that represent what health is and what it should look like. And, you know, from a cultural perspective, we just need to look at the bigger picture and then go from there. I think that's the point I wanted to make because, you know, in a profession as a dietitian, predominantly white field, I get people that come into my virtual office space, you know, for nutrition counseling, talking about their negative experiences that they had with dietitians that were not of color. You know, there's a lot of biases that, you know, people have when it comes to, you know, some of the traditional foods. And sometimes they don't even take that into consideration. But we know like dietitians are needed all across the spectrum. We are needed in the hospitals, in doctors' offices, and et cetera. But the thing that lacks is the cultural humility side of things, especially from a lot of my colleagues. So, you know, I think also too, a lot of the times when you look at the studies, it's talking about, you know, Black people are at risk for heart disease, hypertension, the list goes on. But I just feel like, you know, let's also stop blaming the Black communities for some of these health related issues and understand that, like, you know, what you had mentioned earlier, you know, the social determinants of health is truly important. It largely affects nutrition and health. And, you know, these are some of the barriers that we can definitely identify that require a lot of support. And, you know, a lot of the times we just need to address it. And that piece of the conversation doesn't come in, you know, especially in this field. And so I think, yeah, there's a long way to go. And I think when we're talking about health and nutrition in the Black community, there's just a lot of things that we need to focus on beyond just telling somebody eat this and then, you know, go your merry way.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, I thought of something funny. I had a conversation with my husband the other night and he was looking real sad. And I'm like, what's wrong? He said, I was just thinking about how certain foods that are cultural are going to die out. He was like, you know, I think chitlins are going to die out with my mom. Like, you're not going to cook chitlins, are you? And he was asking, you know, he's like, I don't think my mom's going to do it anymore. And so, you know, how that's something I looked, I was like, oh, okay. But you know, how do we begin to change that idea that, you know, the things that are cultural that we used to love in our families that have been passed down from generation to generation? You know, it just struck me like, yeah, I'm not cooking any chitlins.
Well, yeah, well, you know, I think that one of the answers, I'm not a chicken guy, but my mother is, she loves them. I think one of the answers really is what Kirk had mentioned earlier, which is we can't demonize foods. And we have to really emphasize moderation. That, listen, I always say, even if you live to be 100, life is still short. And we need to have fun in life, and trying to eat perfectly all the time or exercise perfectly all the time. And you guys know I'm very much into fitness. It's not going to happen. And I think that to be stressed out about it is unrealistic. People need to understand that there are some fun foods. Listen, I love fried pork chops like anybody else. Okay, I don't have them every other week. I have them maybe once every couple of months, but I enjoy them. And I'm open about the foods that I love that are not considered to be the healthiest. People say to me all the time, well, Dr. Ian, you're the one writing all these books and you eat fried pork chops, you eat rainbow cake. Yes, because life is about moderation. And I think we really need to do a better job of communicating to people, particularly when we're medical professionals or health professionals, that we're not asking you to eat perfectly. We're not asking you to exercise perfectly. We're just saying, on balance, try to do a little better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
So I think a way to promote that balance, which really helps, is a lot of self-reflection through journaling. I tell my clients all the time, write down everything you eat. Now, I know that's a big challenge for most people, but write it down and write down your what exercises you do on a daily basis. Once you see what you're doing, sometimes if you see that maybe, hey, I'm eating too many pork chops, maybe I need to hold back a little bit, then you can make an adjustment. But for the most part, we forget what we eat. I forgot what I ate this morning. I can't remember what I had the last week. But when you see it, it becomes alive and it affects you in a positive way. So journaling, I think, is critical to be successful. And I think there is probably a report that says if you journal, you'll be more successful than people who do not. So that's the way to go.
Valerie?
And yeah, you know, I think, and just through my experience, like counseling, you know, people every day, I think that when people think of health, and we know that change is hard. It's a process. It's not something that can happen overnight. Oftentimes people are looking for the quick fix. They're like, okay, how can I lose 10 pounds in like a week, you know, or whatever the case. I'm saying that because people do come to me and they're like, Valerie, I need to lose the X amount of weight in this short period of time. Looking at them like, you got the wrong dietitian. But you know, when you think about health, it's like, it can be very overwhelming most of the time, especially like a lot of our experiences, how we were brought up, all these things shape, our beliefs around food. And so it's a process and it can become overwhelming, but I feel like, having a simplified approach and getting back to the basics, maybe it's, what can I do to add more nutrition to my plate already, rather than take away all these foods and, now we have to change this overnight. And sometimes too, that may be the case for that particular person, because, I'll have some people that maybe they got diagnosed with diabetes, and their diabetes, maybe they never checked their A1C before. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, your A1C is a 12. So you got to get things going, as soon as possible. Then they're coming to my office and they're like, you can tell they don't even want to be there. It's like the doctor sent them there, and now they're overwhelmed. They're trying to figure out, okay, they're trying to process the fact that they have a new diagnosis. And it's like, okay, now what? But I think that it's just how we approach this conversation, and taking into consideration, all aspects of their health. I think when emotional side of it comes into play, especially during this pandemic, we're seeing a lot of stress eating, emotional eating, those two things, and access, budget, all these things shape like how we need to eat. And, and there's just so many things, but I think we need to simplify it. And nutrition is a science, it's individualized. And I think a lot of people don't realize that too. What's going to work for, you is not going to work for the next person. And so that education is important. I think a lot of people just don't know. They don't know where to start from. They don't know who to reach out to. Everybody online now. I think it's hard to kind of separate, like, okay, who can I go to for good credible nutrition advice, versus all the people we see online that we call them influencers or whatever name you want to use nowadays. I mean, like, I see misinformation all the time around nutrition and health. And so it's a topic that can be very confusing. And I think that there's so many things to take into consideration, as far as nutrition goes. So I just wanted to add those 2 cents.
Well, that's a great, Val, I'm glad you said that's a great segue to my next point. When you talk about influencers and finding who's the most credible for a particular topic, Jacqueline, one of the most frustrating things for me over the pandemic has been people who are not experts having the loudest voice and the loudest following of opining about what people should and shouldn't be doing during the pandemic. I mean, when you really think about the last 3 years, it's been such an upside down world. Physicians and health advocates who have gone to school for years, who have studied for years, who have researched and been in clinical practice, and they were completely subjugated. They were, put into the second-class status when it came to talking about the pandemic. And it frustrated me because we've studied our whole lives for this. This is why you really want us. When I have a financial problem, I need to go to someone who has been in finance for a long time, because that's not my bailiwick, right? Mm-hmm. How frustrating was it for you, Jacqueline, to hear celebrities, I won't mention any names, come out and just say the most incorrect, absolutely ridiculous things, and then people are listening to them and then repeating it on social media?
It was very frustrating. At the time when the pandemic started, I worked for a local health department here in the Atlanta metro area, and I was just floored. I was floored by the amount of misinformation. I wasn't not surprised by the mistrust, but there was just, when you look on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, it seemed like everyone now had a doctorate in public health. Everyone was now like a CDC, expert. And it was very hard for me. I have years, like you said, I've studied years within public health, and I'm just trying to talk to my friends and family about, the importance of, safety precautions and the vaccine. And I felt like they knew more than I did, and I'm the professional. So I think, we do really have to kind of come back to the table to say, hey, how do we allow people to look at the public health experts as such, because I think there was mistrust before COVID. There was a lot of mistrust during COVID. And now it seems like the tables have switched, and now people on social media are the ones you're listening to, and no one, and people are disregarding organizations like the CDC. So I think we really do, within public health, have to come back to the table to say, this didn't quite work like we thought. We did not lead the conversation. We were really just trying to correct misinformation throughout the process, but I don't feel like the public health field really led in terms of information sharing within the COVID pandemic. And the other panelists might disagree, but I think there's just some work to be done, especially when it comes to trust and how do we properly address misinformation and allow organizations that have done this for years to be the experts.
So now I'm going to come to you. Now let me say this first before you say something. Can you imagine that the country would be in an economic depression and the scientists would be on TV and on social media telling the country how we need to change our financial models? I mean, why would you believe it? It was so upside down. Chanel?
Yeah, I just have a differencing of opinion on this, Jacqueline and Ian. What I've seen is that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for partnerships to happen, an opportunity for public health, our medical community to partner with influencers who have millions of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers to educate them, to give them the right information, because we can't do anything about whose ears they have, right? Who's listening to them, who's following them, who's idolizing them. But what we can do is give them the right information to share. And so I see it as an opportunity. We've done it in the corporate entity that I work for. We have partnered with celebrity influencers to educate about HIV and to share messages that are accurate, that are evidence-based, and that are sound, as well as to help community organizations raise money. It's really a beautiful partnership if you think about it, that medical professionals, those who are trained with academic knowledge and experience, can then share with people who are trusted in community or that are idolized in community, to really give them the information. Call them in instead of calling them out. Call them in and say, here are the facts. Share these facts with your followers. And you present a new audience of people who are informed in the right way.
Well, listen, Chanel, I agree with you. I think that's a great idea. In fact, I propose that we all form a consortium as African-American health advocates and try to get some of these big, celebrities with huge followers. Maybe they'll talk to us and we can give them the information. I mean, I think, honestly, I'm serious. I think that's a really great idea. And going forward, and we're going to talk a little about how we go from here, but I think one of the action steps could be that we all come together and say to, I'm trying to avoid saying names, but to say to some of these people, hey, talk to us for 15, 20, can we get an audience with you and talk about, some of these things? I think that's important. The other thing I like to say is that, I've spent the bulk of my career believing that as much as I would like people to make a 180-degree turn, which is a full turn, that sometimes people are only going to make 100 or 115. And you have to be accepting of that and look at the good side of it, which is they've made some progress, because everyone's not going to make the full progress that you want. And I think that's part of how we have to negotiate this with people, right? Because transformation is hard. We all know that. And I think that we also have to do a better job of saying to people, hey, a little bit of progress is better than no progress at all, right, Kirk?
I totally agree with you. And I think that everyone understands the need for change. We have to do something different, but people really don't want to change too much because it creates a lot of stress. So when you're working and damn near killing yourself trying to earn a living, you don't want to upset yourself too much. So my philosophy is just give people maybe a little information so they can make a 1-degree change per day, per week, per month. Just give them a little bit at a time. And once they start to pick up some momentum and see the beneficial effects, then wow, hey, I can do this. And then maybe they'll shoot on over to a complete 180 right away. But we got to start them out slow and just nudge them in the right direction and help them to make the choice instead of us telling them what to do. Give them the options and help them make the best choice.
And Jacqueline, listen, we all know that it's so important for patients and others to make change in their life. But I've always said, it's not just about having the desire to make the change. It's about when you make the change, right? You have to make the change at the right time for you. For some people, trying to make a big change in your life when you're stressed out, when you're having relationship issues, financial issues, sometimes the other things going on are so big that you're not going to be able to make those changes. How do you counsel people in making change? I mean, that's so important.
I think when it comes to behavior change, we really have to meet people where they are. We have to as has been said before, listen more than we speak. We have to have a clear understanding of what their desire to change is, some potential challenges and barriers that they faced when attempting to make this change or modification in the past. And like Kirk said, it might not be a 100, it might not be the significant change, but if we can just get them to begin to make baby steps, right, in the right direction, I think that would be more successful in the long run. So I think it's really just hearing people out, understanding where they are, what they need, and helping them in a tangible way. Because sometimes as health experts, we have so much knowledge and information, and sometimes it's really overwhelming. Like you said, we have to think about all of the aspects of social determinants of health, all of the barriers, all of the challenges that people have to face when moving towards that behavior change. And so it's like, how can we help them in a tangible way, in a way that they can really make some momentum? And I think that has, for me, really been the most beneficial way. And then also taking culture into consideration, like what's going to be fun? What are they going to enjoy? We don't want it to just be a task or something on their to-do list. We want this to become a part of their lifestyle. So we have to take that into consideration as well.
I think another, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
I wanted to add to Dr. Jacqueline. So I just feel like motivation is super important, because most of the time, like I mentioned earlier, I'll get someone coming into a nutrition counseling session, and maybe they just feel forced, like they have to be there, but they don't necessarily want to be there. So it's like assessing their readiness to change, because if you don't want to change, then this whole process is pointless, right? So how do we get people to be motivated about wanting to make the changes, like wanting to, eat healthier for, long-term better health? Like, how do we, I feel like the collaborative approach is like really important when you're thinking change, especially when it comes to nutrition. When I involve people as a part of like the nutrition plan, and I turn it back to them to be a part of their own solutions, making things very realistic, that's when it works. That's when I actually see them making progress, So I wanted to just add that, because I really do think it all, when it comes to behavioral, it comes back to, motivation and actually wanting to do it, not just feeling like you have to do it because your doctor told you.
And another point is that I think we have to make our clients and those who are around us, we have to get them to understand, look, I can do this. And you, as the person who's giving information, of course, you want to be able to do it to show them how to do it. But I can do this. I can do it right now. And I can do it right here where I am. If you can get that person to understand those three things and then help them possibly to set up their environment for success instead of failure. For instance, if you want to start converting to plant-based eating, or maybe you want to get rid of some foods or out of your diet, you can't have those foods in front of your face all the time. You can't have on the kitchen table a piece of cake and ice cream. You have to have like a big fruit bowl. So how can we help that person set him or herself up for success? And, I read a book. Every 5 years, it seems like I read a life-changing book. The last one I read was Atomic Habits, making small little changes. If you want to run in the morning, put your sneakers right by the bed. So when you wake up, your sneakers are there, you put them on and you're out the door. No thinking about it, no hesitation. So we have to help people and guide them when it comes to life change.
Well, everything you guys are saying is well and good, but listen, I don't have a lot of money. So I can't afford to go to these expensive stores and buy all this fresh fruit and all these fresh vegetables. I also like to have, my fried foods. Why are you going to take away all my fried foods? Some of these foods I don't even know how to pronounce. Can't afford a gym membership. You guys want me to make all these changes. I got 2 kids. I got to work. They got to be in different places. How do you want me to do all these changes that you're talking about?
One at a time, just one at a time. It has to start with just one thing, at most 2. Most people can't handle more than that. So if we give them just a little bit, I tell my clients all the time, look, I want you to go out and I want you to get engaged in cardio, but I want you to pick a length or a time amount that you know you can do every day. You could be in a drunken coma and you could still walk around the block because it's just that easy. So when it's that easy, you have absolutely no excuse not to do it. But who knows, maybe 1 walk around the block will turn into 2 walks around the block just because you're out there and you're working up a sweat. So again, we got to start maybe sometimes with just one thing, at max 2. That's what I've found.
I like the idea of the motivation. Like, what is your motivation? And to me, it's what is your why? Is it your children? Is it being there for your grandchild's graduation? Is it your partner that you love and you want to spend as much time on this earth with your partner? Or maybe it's the event that's coming up in, a year, and you want to look good for that event. But what is your why? And then having the accountability partner, someone to help you to stay on the wagon, just keep you committed to whatever that thing is that you're trying to do.
Listen, go ahead.
I like what Chanel said about an accountability partner. And as I mentioned before, I think having a journal can be that accountability partner. It can be that, it's like a living person telling you what to do. And I say that because I had a client one time, he said, you know what, Kirk, I didn't eat that piece of cake because I didn't want to write it down. All right. So I said, oh, wow, it's actually working, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it's working, Kirk. I'm like, great. So keep that journal.
Yeah, accountability is, I think, so critical. For every book I do, it's a health book, I always have a Facebook group. Okay. And in this Facebook group, it's a support group. So with Plant Power, I got a Facebook group called Plant Power. Thousands of people doing it together. And what I've learned over the years is that, number one, when people are in a supportive environment, then they feel like they can actually do it. Even before they didn't think they could do it, when they see others making progress or others who have a similar situation, difficulties, they say, well, maybe I actually can do it. Then what I also realize is that when people realize there are other people who are watching them and seeing what they're doing, they feel like they have to be accountable. And so they know that when I go back into the group and I need to post a result or post what I did this weekend, they want to be able to say, hey, I did well also. And so I really believe that people need to find places, support groups, accountability groups that can really help them. Because once again, making these types of changes and breaking bad habits alone can be very difficult.
I love to see a good line dance. I follow those on Facebook and I see people in, rural school gymnasiums or church basements, learning the newest line dance.
Right.
And that's accountability because they're gathering together at a certain time at a place that is convenient for them. Again, no need for a fancy bike, maybe your cell phone, and you find your favorite song or your favorite line dance video, and you are learning it together and having a lot of fun.
And another important point is that we like to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be for real. And if we can get a group together and make it fun, make it like we're not even exercising, we're not making a change, that goes a long way. Fun is the key. And I tell my clients all the time as we're engaged in a training session, I'm like, look, if I say, are we having fun now? They have to say yes. Are you enjoying yourself? You better say yes, because that's why we're here, to have fun and to be free physically. And, we may as well get in shape too while we're at it.
That's right.
I love that, Kirk, because when people think health, they're like, it's boring. I don't want to be a part of it. It's going to be another boring presentation. I don't want no parts. And so I love that you mentioned, just have fun with it, because we have all this, talked about, it's a lifestyle. This shouldn't be another thing on your to-do list. It's a matter of life and death and, long-term better health for generations after us and after us. And so we have to have fun with it. It has to be a part of, our everyday life.
Do you guys think that, do you think that people in our community who have either the most resources or the most influence are really pulling their weight as far as educating, helping, and encouraging our people to do better?
I think that's very hard. It's a very hard thing to do. Why? Because the most successful among us, for instance, many athletes may have a fast food commercial out. Right now, we know that fast food isn't in your best interest. We know that fast food advertising is much more rife in the African-American community. We know that here where I live in Jersey, there's a street they call Cancer Row. All right, at the hospital, that is. A doctor told me they call it Cancer Row because we get a lot of cancer patients from that general area where they live in a place that's just clustered with a lot of fast food establishments. So when the most successful among us do that, and then we try to tell them to be healthy on the other side, it's a mixed message. So I really don't have an answer for that.
Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
I think that our influencers can always do more, and it's on all of us to hold them accountable to it, to make the ask, as I said earlier, to call them in, to provide, the information to share with so many others. There is a responsibility, I believe, when people are looking up to you, when they idolize you and admire you, none of us are perfect, right? None of us are perfect, but there is some sense of responsibility to share information that is accurate.
And there are people out there who are doing it. Again, I'm a big plant-based eating advocate, have been for more than 30 years. But someone like Kyrie Irving, for instance, he was just on TV the other day, played a great game. But about 4 or 5 years ago, he was being interviewed, and after the game, they're like, "Kyrie, you have so much energy, you play great. What are you doing differently?" He said, well, to be honest, I'm on like a plant-based diet now. I have a lot more energy and my recovery time is a lot better or a lot shorter. So if athletes can engage in a change of diet and exercise and share it with other people and just tell them what they're doing, a guy like Tom Brady, he has his TB12 performance meals. They're, basically vegan meals. Chris Paul has talked about plant-based eating, another great basketball player. The Tennessee Titans defense, the entire defense maybe 5 years ago converted to a vegan diet because one of the wives of one of the players was a cook. So she cooked for everybody. And when we're talking about football players, we're talking about the biggest and strongest among us for the most part. If they can do it and if they see the virtue in it, then pretty much everyone can do it. So there are a lot of people out there who are doing the right thing or who are doing beneficial things. But again, there are those among us who are doing some things that are detrimental. Who do we know who to trust? Who do we know who to follow? That's a big question, but I'm slanting toward the plant-based side.
Go ahead, Valor.
I was just going to say, I have been a part of, some initiatives in the past, just working directly with African-American communities to just like raise awareness, educate people to, live a healthier life, whether, in areas where they're most vulnerable, talking about how to eat on a budget, how to, lower sodium, just some of the common things that we see, trying to provide that solution. So I think it's getting out in these, communities, getting out in the churches and partnering with the community leaders. All these things can go a long way.
I want to pivot for a second. I want
Can I
to.
mention one thing, Dr. Ian?
Sure.
Thing. You mentioned the economic factor. Hey, I can't afford all this fancy food. One time before a presentation, and I speak in a lot of impoverished communities, before the presentation, I went to maybe a ShopRite or an Acme, and I took a picture of every food item in the first aisle, the produce section, that was less than $2 a pound. I also went to the section where there are rice and beans, and I took a picture of every item less than $2 a pound. I had like 50 items, 50. Now, with those items you can make a nice soup or a lentil soup. A bag of lentils, a pound costs less than $1. A bag of rice costs less than $1. Carrots probably cost $1 or less. Celery, things like that. You can make something nutritious if we show people the right way, even if they're on a tight budget.
Yeah, I think that, we as public health advocates can't fatigue in getting the message. And even when we meet resistance, we have to continue to want to try and try again. When I was doing the 50 Million Pound Challenge many years ago, some African-American, leaders thought I was crazy. Black people aren't going to change the way they eat. You're not going to get them to exercise more. And my feeling is, well, maybe a lot of them may not, but I believe that some of them will. And you got to at least try to work with those who will work with you. And I think as a leader and a public health advocate, I think that's our obligation.
Well, Dr. Ian, you probably are crazy because I'm crazy too. And you got to be crazy enough to believe that you can make a positive change. And, one just quick little story. When I tell people I'm vegan and I've been vegan since 1989, they look at me a little weird, like, what the hell is wrong with you? But when I tell people I'm plant-based, they're like, I've heard of that. That sounds great. So a lot of times it depends on the messaging. Just switching from vegan to plant-based makes all the difference. I don't know why. It's basically the same thing, but here we are.
Question, just how has it made you feel different? Someone who's thinking about it, and want to know the benefits, like physically, how do you feel different?
Me personally, I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I think we can't do is talk to people about, well, if you change your diet, you won't get cancer and you won't get heart disease. See, that's a long way off. So one presentation that I do is called the immediate effects of plant-based eating. Some things happen within a day to 2 or 3 days. For instance, you might have constipation relief like instantly. All right. You may have healthier skin, or it may feel better instantly. Asthma may go away, or you may have to stop, or you may be able to stop taking some of your asthma medications. Inflammation relief, lower blood pressure, autoimmune relief. So some things happen immediately, and I like to start with those immediate things. Why? Because if you feel that immediate effect, and when I say immediate, let's say 1 to 4 or 5 days, when you feel that, then you start thinking about the long-term things sometimes. So how has it affected me personally? Well, I'm trying to get to 60 years old in good health. I'm basically the same size as I was back in 1980 something when I graduated from college. Okay. Personally, I used to have headaches, and I don't get those any longer. My skin, I think that's a lot healthier. And overall, I think I have a fair amount of energy for someone my age. I like to hang out with the younger guys sometimes. They're trying to put me out the pasture, but I'm still fighting. And, one friend I go running with, we do sprints, 100-yard sprints, 200 yards. He takes off like a bullet, and I'm lagging behind. I look like an old man trying to keep up, but that's better than looking like an old man who's sitting on the bench. So it's helped out in multitudinous ways. I can't even tell you about all the benefits. And once people see what I'm doing, they're like, well, Kurt, what are you doing? They start asking questions. But if I start out by just telling them what to do, it never works. You can't push it on people. When they come to me, they start asking, I give them all the information they need. And the results are priceless, as they say.
And that's why I said that I'm not vegan, but I'm plant-based, 70%, because I think that the benefits you mentioned are what I experienced when I was doing my 4-week plan, Plant Power, and I felt it. I felt all those things that you said. But when we talk about things that we can do, what about corporations? African Americans have some of the biggest, largest spending power of any ethnic group. And we buy all these different things, but are corporations really lifting, doing the right lift, doing their proper lift to really give back, to help out, to improve the health environment for African Americans?
Yeah, I can take this question. I work in public affairs and corporate giving, corporate citizenship, social impact. And I can say for the company I work for that we most certainly are giving back to communities, and not just community, but intentional about equity among diverse communities. That means Black communities. That means Latinx communities. That means transgender communities. That means health equity around education. And so I am in the midst of that type of work. And I know that there are many other corporations who are giving. I think the important piece is connecting corporate entities in their social good to organizations that can make impact. You know, those high impact organizations, as well as startups who need the funding and the expertise that a corporate entity can give to reach communities that are most impacted.
Well, Chanel, I'm going to take you up on that, okay? Because I'm going to put together, hopefully with others on the call here, an initiative and come to you guys and say, please help fund this initiative as we try to reach out and help. I really believe, honestly, with the amount of money that we have in this country, if we could get some people, not everyone, you don't need everybody, but if you get a few people who are like-minded in the idea and the belief that change can happen, that corporations can be leaders of change, and that helping and causing communities to do better is still in the interest of the corporation, I think that you have a win-win situation when that happens.
It's absolutely true. I'm with Gilead Sciences. They saw a need to address HIV in the Southern US and made a commitment 4 years ago, a 10-year commitment, because we know that it takes time to see change as well. You know, oftentimes, you know, funders will give a 1-year commitment of some sort and expect the world to change based on a 1-year commitment. And it doesn't happen that way. It's just not realistic. So you have to be committed for the long term, as well as in partnership. And it's a reciprocal partnership, a give and take, oftentimes, where community can be leading the work based on the things that they know works in community, but also the corporate entity can fund and support and continue to uplift organizations in the way that the organization sees that they need to go. And so that's what we do at Gilead Sciences, a 10-year, $100 million commitment to address HIV in the Southern US through the Gilead Compass Initiative. And we have so many more signature or strategic initiatives that are serving communities.
And we talk about corporations, but also what about government? I know, we've been beating this drum for a long time about health disparities. I remember, Surgeon General David Thatcher, when he was, Thatcher, excuse me, when he was Surgeon General, how he had talked about trying to close the health disparities. Is the government doing enough? And what more should the government be doing, or how should they be doing it differently?
I think Jacqueline can take this one. I know she mentioned she worked in a health department.
I think there's a lot that could be done. Again, I think everything always comes back to social determinants of health, transportation, housing. I know we've talked a lot about nutrition, but the cost of food right now is.
Jacqueline, explain to the listeners what you mean by, we've used this term a lot, and it's kind of inside baseball. Mm-hmm. What is meant in general when we say social determinants of health?
So when we talk about social determinants of health, those are key factors that impact our long-term health outcomes. So education, economics, transportation. So we think about a lot of these things, commonly in smaller segments, but they really all have a significant impact on our long-term health outcomes. When you think about housing, right? Crime, is the neighborhood safe? Is there lead in the paint? Is there issues with mildew and mold, right? All of these things impact our health. It's not just about physical activity and nutrition. There's so many other elements that come into play. And so when I think about our government, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, especially within communities of color. And when we think about institutional racism and things like that, I think we're definitely moving forward, but there's still a lot more work that needs to be done.
And we have to apply pressure, right? And we have to know how to apply pressure. There's so many different ways, to apply pressure. We learned from the civil rights movement. It's not one size fits all. You have to work inside, you have to work outside, you have to have financial pressure, political pressure. But everyone, I think, has to believe in a community that they in some way can play a part and applying the pressure. Sometimes the situation is so large that the individual says, what can I do? I'm just a small person, but that's not true. People have to believe that you as an individual can still spark change and spark differences?
It's all up to me. Policy is an important piece of it as well. Advocating, there's the activists or advocates who can make the noise and be heard, but then there's also those who work to change policy. And we've seen that in so many health movements in HIV, for example, around policy, with the Ryan White Care Act, providing care to people living with HIV. We've seen that in maternal health. As last week, we just had Black Maternal Health Week, right? And so we've seen policies, state level as well at the federal level, that have been introduced to address Black maternal mortality. And so, policy is an important thing to move.
I have a comment and a question because I don't know the answer to it. Hopefully some of you will, or all of you will. Back when the Obamas were in the White House, Michelle Obama gave a speech to the Food Manufacturers Association. And she laid into them about changing some of their practices and policies regarding what to make and how to change what they're making. I don't believe that movement went too far because I don't believe the Obamas have the political capital to really make that change because the food manufacturers are extremely powerful. So then we have the Let's Move campaign, which is fine. Everyone understands the need for exercise and moving. But to get the food manufacturers to change the way that they produce food, which they need a lot of chemicals, for instance, the high blood pressure problem in the African community. If salt and sodium is a contributor to that problem, if it is, then how do you get those food manufacturers to take all the sodium or some of the sodium out of the foods that they're making? There's so many sodium preservatives and additives and colorings that are used, probably 100 or so that use that are based on sodium, that you can't even taste how salty a food is. So it's not the salt, it's the sodium that we're talking about. So how do we get them to make that change? That's the question. How do we apply political pressure or any type of pressure to get them to make that change? Because something has to be done regarding what people are eating. So as soon as you walk past that first aisle in the supermarket, you walk out of the produce section, you get all these nice glittery colored packages with all this processed food. It looks so good and it's fortified and it's sweet and has a whole lot of protein in it. It's a whole lot of garbage with stuff added into it to make it taste good and to make it addictive so you will buy it and eat more. How do we get them to make that change when we know that they're going to lose a little bit of money doing it? That's my question. I don't have an answer for it. I don't have it right now.
I mean, listen, I have always believed that it is a very complicated relationship when it comes to, in a capitalistic society that we're in, it's a very complicated relationship when you are expecting for-profit businesses to have the public interest as a priority when they also are dealing with their supposed number one priority, which is the bottom line. And so at times, these things conflict. And I don't have the exact answer to your question, but I will say this to you. Over the years, manufacturers have been forced by market demand to make changes. For example, trans fats. Trans fats were in everything because a trans fat makes a food product more shelf stable, which means that the food product could stay on the shelf for months and months and not spoil, which is good for the retailer, for the store, the grocery store that's selling it, and it's also good for the manufacturer. So trans fats were very important, and they had a direct effect on the profitability of a product. Where are trans fats now? They're almost gone. They're almost gone because the public health community said, listen, trans fats are killing people. They are leading to all kinds of different conditions. And so when the public health community started raising an awareness about how bad trans fats were, and then when people like Mayor Bloomberg of New York City and other politicians started realizing, we got to get rid of this stuff. First of all, there's no need. You don't have to have trans fats unless you're worried about the bottom line. And so now most manufacturers have taken trans fats. In fact, it's gotten so good that they will actually advertise no trans fats. So they went from, a fully trans fat laden food to advertising no trans fats. So I believe that public pressure has to lead the way of saying manufacturers have to be better. Some of these fast food chains, they eventually come around to, for those who eat meat, they eventually come around to using real beef in their meat because people said, well, we're not going to eat your hamburgers anymore. We're going to go down the street and go to a place that's actually using fresh meat. So I think it's public pressure that has to lead the way. And I think that politicians, have to want to try to also add to that pressure.
I believe you. I think boycotting is the answer, to be honest, saying, look, we're just not going to buy this product. So I agree with you 100%. And speaking of politicians, I think one guy who would be sort of perfect to help with health in the African-American community would be the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. As you probably know, he wrote a book, I believe it was prior to being elected mayor, about his journey into plant-based eating and veganism and how it basically saved his life. He woke up one day, he was blind in one eye, could barely see out of the other, type 2 diabetes, he was way overweight, and he thought he was in good shape at that time, but then he started having all these health problems. Then he goes to see a Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn out in, I believe, Ohio, the same doctor, by the way, who helped Bill Clinton when he had his heart problems. He changed his life and everything instantly changed, well, over the course of maybe a year or so. So people like him who have actually gone through the transition. My great senator from the state of New Jersey, Cory Booker, every time I see him, I'm like, you still vegan, Cory? He's like, yeah, I'm still vegan, man. All right, cool. So, there are people out there who can really help and apply pressure here and there. So I agree with you.
And Valerie, you see patients on a daily basis, clients on a daily basis who are looking to make a change. There are going to be some people who are going to say to you, I'm sure they have said to you, listen, Valerie, with all due respect, veganism or vegetarianism is not my lane, but I know I need to do better. How do you communicate that message to them?
Yeah, it all goes down to, what their health status looks like, because there's so many things that I'm taking into consideration when, someone's coming to work with me or improve on their health. So their blood work, we look at, any medical history that, they have going on, food allergies, the list goes on. And then we get to the culture side of things, what are your favorite cultural foods? There's so many things that we're looking at to assess, like, where is your actual nutritional status right now? I will never say this is what you have to do, goodbye, and never see you again. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's a process. And so it always goes back to, okay, this is what's going on with you. Now we have to, where do you stand on your motivation? Where do you want to go from here? And then once I kind of get through all that, then we get down to the things that are more priority. Of course, if someone's, they're having a lot of blood pressure issues, then it's okay, we need to tackle these things. Let's see what you're already eating and where can we make a change. But yeah, on an individual level, like I said, I'll never say, hey, go vegan or go vegetarian. I think it's not going to work for everyone. And so it's just going back to what is something that you really want to do and what's going to work for what you have going on right now. And so that's what I'll say to answer. It's not for everyone, but we can make some small changes. You mentioned earlier, it's not going to be 180 for some people or even most people, but if you get to 115, 100, or or even less than that, well, you made some progress, and then you kind of just go from there, because it's not overnight. It's a process, and you just have to be motivated. Like Chanel, I believe you said earlier, what is your why? Getting back to the why, and then going from there also.
I love following Tabitha Brown, social, when we think about influencers, and just the beauty of her spirit, as well as the way that she shares and spreads love, but talks about her eating journey as well. And so, influencers like her and many others can really help communities, can help followers choose healthy choices and options. I also think it's important when the researchers who are in academic institutions, providing the scientific knowledge and the evidence for the things that we think are important to move the needle on health. But the other part is the arts. as Kurt was talking, I was thinking about all the documentaries that came out about food. And watching those documentaries make you not want to go back to certain places ever again, ever. Things you didn't know, the behind the scenes about what's happening in these establishments and how those are influencing policy change.
Yeah. Jacqueline, I was just thinking, someone like yourself who has and is in public health, I wonder, from your lens, when you look at, particularly for African Americans and kind of the struggles we've had over the years and what resources are or are not behind us, what's the outlook for us? I mean, sometimes it feels like every man for himself and that there's no help or hope for, I would say, the little guy, because he's always an afterthought rather than a primary thought in a lot of cases. What does it look like for us in the public health arena?
I think the public health field is working very hard to address a lot of the disparities that we've been talking about today. Like I said, there's been so much work done in terms of HIV, nutrition, chronic disease, but this is a continuum. I don't ever think we will be able to check the box to say, the health status of the Black community is perfect. I think there's always going to be continued progress that needs to be made to move the needle forward. So I would just say, honestly, we have to keep the conversation going. And like I said, it has to come from your pastor. It has to, we have to talk about it at the barbershops, at the beauty shops. It has to be talked about with our children at school. Health, nutrition, physical activity, the elimination of chronic disease, it needs to be infiltrated in everything that we do. And we need corporations, we need policy, we need advocacy. We literally need every facet of the spectrum on our side in advocating for us. We need affordable foods. We need safe homes and communities. So I think we're on the right track. But again, we all need to be speaking the same language, advocating for the same things to further improve the health of the Black community.
Jacqueline, I just want to say you did such a beautiful job at describing and articulating the social determinants of health. And so, the answer for me is we won't achieve health equity until we have living wages for people,
yes,
until communities are safe, right? Neighborhoods are safe, and that there are access to healthy foods options in those communities, until our educational system. And I think that's one thing that COVID exposed for us is the weakness and how fragile our education system is for our children. And so until we address all those social determinants of health that Jacqueline so beautifully described, we won't be able to achieve equity. It's more than just health.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I'd like to kind of pivot to the idea of what's actionable. I always believe it's great to have ideology and high-minded ideas and all these, hypotheses, but people have to be able to put it to use in their life. And so I want to do, make a round on, give me 3 things that people could do to change their life today, not next week, but I need 3 things from each of you that people can do starting today that can change their life. And Kirk, I'm going to start with you.
Number one, change your environment. As I said before, you've got to change your surroundings because the environment, you can slip into some bad habits just based on something being near you. For instance, if I take my cell phone away and I put it behind me instead of in front of me, I don't check it as often and I get more work done on the computer. So something small like that as it pertains to food. Number 2, give people small things that they can do that they know they can do. There's no excuse not to do it. Just get up and make it happen. And number 3, just more education in general. We have to lead by example, and that's the best form of education. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be just like my father. I wanted to walk like he walked and do what he did. Forget about what he said. I just wanted to be like him. So give people an example to see, and if they can see it in motion, I think they'll latch on.
Awesome. Jacqueline?
Sure. I would say the first thing that I would encourage people to do is to make their routine screening appointments. That was something that we saw kind of go by the wayside during COVID. And I think we need to start the conversation again, like, hey, have you went to the dentist? Have you had your mammogram? Have you had your pap smear? What about that colon screening? That is very important because we're seeing a lot of people now going to the doctor, but now their conditions are so much worse because those appointments were put off. So I would say, number one, encouraging people to have their routine screenings. The importance of nutrition, we've talked about it so much today, whether you're vegan or plant-based, or whether it's just simple as drinking more water, eating more fruits and vegetables, and then moving, whether you're walking or riding your Peloton like me at 38 weeks pregnant, whatever you decide to do, line dance, but just move and move your body, get your heart rate going.
Awesome. Chanel, your three things?
Yeah, Jacqueline, you hit them all on the head. Those are the things I was going to say. The only thing that I would add to that is having hope. You know, in addition to the water and the fruits and vegetables and moving and making your appointments and screenings, is having some sense of hope and praying for a better tomorrow. So, you know, that connection to faith and spirituality would be the addition that I would add to everything everyone has said already.
Great. Valerie?
I would say, you know, redefine what health is to you. Healthy looks different for everybody, you know, so redefine it, what it means to you. I think one thing that we didn't talk much about today was the topic around mental health and wellness. And so I think, you know, that's number one. You know, when we talk about health, if you're not well mentally, it's hard to make changes and it's hard to, you know, move forward with your goals. And so see where you are, where your baseline is with your mental, you know, health and wellness. And also lastly, you know, seek out, you know, RDs and that can help you. If when it comes to nutrition and health and making a change, sometimes it's hard to do it on your own. So if you are able to, definitely seek out someone that can help you, like a registered dietitian. There's not many Black dietitians. I believe the number is about 2.6. And I think it's, you know, as the conversation of race has been coming up quite a lot, there's more Black dietitians, you know, coming into the field. And so that's a wonderful thing that I'd like to see more of. But yes, definitely seek out some help if you feel like you need that guidance.
And when you say 2.6, 2.6%.
2.6%. It's a very white dominated field for so many, you know, there's so many reasons, but I would say just generally historically, I mean, we weren't allowed to practice in this field back in the day. And so changes have happened. It's a very expensive field, you know, to become a dietitian is challenging. And so we need to invest in Black communities and offer funding, you know, to schools to support this kind of education. And so, yeah, there's a lot. I'm like, I don't want to take this on to another topic today since it seems like we're wrapping up here, but there's a lot, you know, culture is something that we also need to talk about because in a predominantly white, you know, field, that doesn't seem like the priority topic that comes up. And we know representation is important. We know we need to think about culture when we think about health because we have a wide, diverse population that we're dealing with in so many different settings. And so we need to meet them where they are. And I think, yeah, representation is the key here as well.
I'm gonna give my three things. My first thing is that I think people starting today can give themselves some grace. And I think that, you know, we don't spend enough time caring for ourselves. And I think that it should be everyone's goal that you spend at least 1 hour a day just doing something for you, something that you enjoy, that's not an obligation, that's not on the schedule, whether it's reading a book, whether it's walking outside, whatever it is, listening to music, 1 hour where it's just about you. It's not about your kids or your spouse or anybody else. It's just about you. So that's the first thing. Number two, I think that starting today, you can consume 3 servings at least of fruits and or vegetables a day. So, you know, you could have an apple in the morning, you could have a salad in the afternoon, You could have some asparagus at night. But 3 servings, hopefully up to 5 servings as the goal, of fruits and vegetables every single day. I think that is huge. And the last thing I think that people can do starting today is to call somebody you haven't talked to in a while, a loved one, a friend who's been on your mind. And don't call them because you need something or they need something. Call them just to connect. I think that we have lost our connection, our human connection. And that has a real big impact on our mental health and our physical health. And I think that just doing that can make a difference. And I've done it recently where I've just called someone and said, hey, just call them because I thought about you. You know, I was doing something you can't mind. So I just decided I'm going to call you right when I think about you and just connect. It doesn't have to be an hour conversation, but just letting people know that you're out there, that you're thinking about them, I think can make a big difference. So those are my 3 things that people can do starting today that can make a difference. We are wrapping up, so I wanted to give you all a quick lightning round on what would be your final thoughts, your final tips, advice that you would give people as far as not just improving the quality of their life, but improving the length of their life. And so, Kirk, I'll start with you again.
Simply, the more vegetables you eat, the better off you'll be. Now, you don't have to go 100%. You don't have to be a zealot like I am, go crazy and be 100%, but start out with 50, keep that journal and just inch it up to 51 next week, 52 the next week, and see how far you can go with it. Sooner or later, you're going to find that perfect spot for you where you are happy and healthy and you're just feeling great and everybody loves being around you. It's that simple.
Awesome. Jacqueline?
I think we've, stressed the importance of nutrition and physical activity. I would also just like to add, just assess where you are mentally. We didn't, kind of talk thoroughly about that, but when we think about COVID, people did have issues with anxiety, loss of loved ones, depression. So I would just encourage people to incorporate mental health as a priority as well.
Awesome. Chanel?
That's a good question. I was sitting here thinking, just to believe in yourself, as a people, all that we have endured generation after generation to get us, me, you, the individual to where you are today. So, you come from a strong line of folks, and to believe in yourself and all that you have to contribute to the world. So, that's where I would leave us, is you can accomplish anything based on what we've been through and where we are right now. So it's just a beautiful time to be alive and to wake up tomorrow, to pray and to hope to see tomorrow, so do what you need to do to stay around, because you are important and you have a contribution to the world to make.
And not just stay around, but stay around in good condition so that you can enjoy it, that you're actually staying around. Valerie?
I love that, breaking the cycle. And so I would just finish off by saying, nutrition doesn't have to be complicated. Just think about one thing that you can change and that you can make every single day for a better life. It's not a race, it's progress, and you can absolutely do it no matter where you are in your health journey, and be empowered in your health.
Awesome. Well, this is just a wonderful conversation. And I think that we need to have more people who talk and look like us actually speaking about these topics. The ability to reach people who are in need is enormous in platforms like this. You never know who you're going to touch, which is why I'll speak to 2 people in a room, I'll speak to 2,000, because you don't know who you're going to touch. And I really am appreciative that all of you who are experts in your fields also are compassionate, because you got to have compassion, right? You got to have the desire to want to help people and make people's lives better, and humility. And so Kirk, Jacqueline, Chanel, and Valerie, I appreciate all of you. And real fast before we go, if you all can quickly give your social so people can follow you and reach out to you, that would be awesome. Kirk, real fast.
Instagram at Kirk Charles, @KirkCharles.
Jacqueline?
I'm on all social media platforms at JDOW Fitness. That's JDOW Fitness.
Chanel?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, Chanel L. McGoy. Please find me and follow.
Valerie?
Yeah, you can find me at Flourish Heights, and also we have the Flourish Heights podcast for women's health nutrition as a resource.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining me today, and those who are watching. I hope that this has been informative and educational, and of course, inspirational. I hope you enjoyed it.
Hi, I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP and Executive Editor-at-Large for Black Enterprise. Thank you for joining us for our latest Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice virtual town hall on wellness and health disparities, how Black people can live better and longer. We hope you're leaving tonight's discussion with new information and motivation to pursue better, longer lives for you and your family. Remember, you can log back in to watch the playback of today's town hall on demand. And don't forget to share on social media using the hashtag #BETownHall. Thank you to our moderator, Dr. Ian Smith, and our panelists for sharing their expertise, and an extra special thanks to our sponsor, Gilead Sciences, for joining us to present this important event. Be sure to join us in Philadelphia next month, May 18th through 20th, for the return of the Black Enterprise Entrepreneur Summit, hosted by Nationwide as a live in-person event. And in Baltimore, October 12th through 14th, for the in-person return of the Black Men Excel Summit, hosted by FedEx. For the latest information on all of our upcoming events, both in-person and virtual, go to blackenterprise.com/BE events. The message today was loud and clear. When it comes to maximizing Black earning power and closing America's racial wealth gap, health really is wealth. Let's each do our part to pursue longer, better, and more prosperous lives for ourselves, our families, and our communities.